Greetings and welcome to the Department of Tangents podcast, episode 42, a conversation with Ian McDonald, writer and director of the new film Some Freaks, plus a track from Sean Sullivan's new comedy album, Song and Dance Man. As always, I'm your host, Nick Zano. Before I get into the main spiel, I wanted to note that all through October on the Department of Tangents blog, I'm featuring a different horror or horror-related short film as part of the Daily Horror Film Fest. There are straight-up horror films, there are parodies, some have a sci-fi bent, just all kinds of good stuff going on every day, all month, from independent filmmakers at departmentoftangents.com. Now, if you haven't seen Some Freaks, you can find it on iTunes and Amazon at the moment. It's Ian McDonald's first feature film, a coming-of-age story about the frustrations of trying to fit in. It's not a cute film. There are some heartwarming moments. The characters laugh together, they lean on each other, but they can also be incredibly mean to each other, and they do things that they'll ultimately regret and don't always know how to make that up to each other, or even if they want to. McDonald chose to make these characters as real as possible. He really captures the vulnerability of those late teenage years where you want to run headlong into the world and see what it's all about, but you're still intensely uncomfortable with who you are because that's not fully formed yet. We spoke about the themes of the film and the challenges of making it, and also a bit about one of the leads, Lily Mae Harrington, and the soundtrack from Walter Sickert and the Army of Broken Toys. This is Harrington's first film, and she also contributed an original song. And stick around after the conversation for a new track from Sean Sullivan's album, Song and Dance Man. And now, Ian McDonald. So, is it Some Freaks the way it's like the Rolling Stones, Some Girls, or is it Some Freaks, as in here's a couple of freaks? What's the proper pronunciation of the title or of the phrase?
That's the first time I've gotten that. I guess Some Freaks as in the Rolling Stones song title. That's closer to that, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to give anything away that that you might think is a spoiler. So, if you could, how would you describe the plot of the movie?
Yeah, sure. So, basically, I see it as sort of a coming-of-age, young love story about these two people who meet in high school, and they're, to varying degrees, socially ostracized, and kind of as a result of not really having a lot of other people around them, wind up gravitating towards one another.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a guy who's missing an eye and wears an eye patch named Matt. There's a girl named Jill who's somewhat overweight. And Matt's best friend is this closeted gay kid named Elmo.
Mm-hmm.
And anyways, Matt and Jill fall in love, and things go great while they're in high school, and then they, Jill winds up getting into a college somewhere across the country, and they're separated for about 6 months, and at the end of that, Matt flies out to visit her, and when he gets there, he discovers that she's lost, like 50 or 60 pounds, and suddenly he begins to feel sort of insecure about what his role in her life will be, because she's climbing the social ladder, and she has new friends, and, a sort of network of people around her that he sort of longs for but doesn't have. And, meanwhile, she's beginning to think, like, maybe I can do better than this kid. Like, why am I still attached to this person?
Mm-hmm.
And, from there on out, it's, kind of about social outcasts who try to fit in with, mainstream-ish society, I guess, and,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of find that it's not all that it's cracked up to be.
What inspired the movie? Is there any autobiography in the plot?
Not really. I mean, it feels emotionally autobiographical, but
Mm-hmm.
narratively, it's not. I really wasn't that kid that was at the bottom of the social ladder being teased every day.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of my friends were, and a lot of the sort of darker aspects of the film, like narratively, mostly just come from stories that I've heard from friends and acquaintances over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So I always wanted this to be sort of like a, like a compendium of all the sort of hellish high school stories that I've heard over the years. I don't think it's an unrelentingly bleak movie, but there's a lot of that in there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but at the same time, when I think back to high school, I think about, experiencing things for the very first time.
Mm-hmm.
And, like falling in love for the first time is like, it's thrilling and it's exciting, but it's also terrifying because it's something that can be taken away.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that sense, there's a sense of autobiography to it. I think the sort of, the emotions all feel very close to me, even if the storyline is pretty fictional.
Mm-hmm. You hear that from songwriters frequently, that they'll construct a narrative that is not about them, but expresses something fairly, an emotion or a feeling that is fairly deep-seated.
Yeah, because, I also think that if you construct a story that's too close to your lived experience,
mm-hmm.
then it makes it really hard to revise it and to be critical of it.
Mm-hmm.
You hear this in like screenwriting and playwriting classes all the time, where someone will bring in a play and read it to the class, and somebody else will say like, yeah, it just didn't feel real to me, and the writer will say like, well, it actually happened, and it's like, well, that doesn't really matter. Something can have actually happened and still not sound or feel real. So I think you need, narrative distance.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, oddly, to be more truthful about a subject.
Mm-hmm. Have you heard back from people for whom this resonated? People who found themselves in Jill and Matt, the two main characters, who found something.
We took it around to film festivals for about a year, and we got some really, wonderful responses from people then. But honestly, even when we were just casting the movie, we did this really wide-ranging casting call where we sent the script out to, not just professional actors, but to like drama departments in colleges across the country, because
mm-hmm.
We were looking for characters that felt like sort of authentic and maybe had a slightly different look to them. And we heard back from a lot of the young women, actually, who sort of auditioned for Jill, who said things like, even if I don't get this part, I'm really happy to know that a movie like this is out there and that it's actually being made.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we get some really nice feedback, kind of from the get-go.
You got a really great cast as well. Everybody did a remarkable job with their roles, I thought, in this. And you've got some people here who have had a lot of experience as well. Like Lily Mae Harrington, this is her debut film, correct?
She's a powerhouse. She kind of carries the movie in a lot of ways. We were really lucky to find her.
Mm-hmm. What about her made her the one for that role?
She's tough and sharp and funny, and those were sort of the qualities that I liked. We auditioned her, I think, on the very first day of auditions, and I'm pretty sure that the first time, so kind of how it works is, you'll audition people for all the maps and then all of the Jills, and then when you've kind of got it narrowed down to like a handful of people that you sort of think could play either part, you start pairing certain masks with certain gills to see how they play off one another. And we paired up Lily and Thomas like on one of the first days that we were doing that, and it was just wonderful. They played off each other really well. There was like a real genuine warmth between the two of them. And I also kind of like the fact that Lily seemed to feel comfortable sort of throwing him around a little bit. Like, oh, this is, she could take this kid. That's great. That's wonderful. I want that. So I mean, yeah, she just, really tough and sort of shrewd and funny and, yeah, great actress.
Mm-hmm. Did the fact that this was your first film and her first film, how did that relationship sort of work?
I mean, I tried the... So yeah, this was my first film, and in a lot of ways, it was a huge education for me. When it was done, I suddenly understood why most first films are like 5 teenagers at a cabin in the woods that they never leave. That suddenly made a lot of sense to me from a logistical standpoint. Like afterwards, I'm just like, oh man, I just did everything wrong. I have a scene at an airport and a hospital and a high school. Like all of these places need, massive amounts of extras, and we're shooting it on a low budget. So like in a lot of ways, it was a logistical nightmare, and that tended to be the learning curve for me in terms of like what I would do differently now. In terms of just a sort of actor-director working relationship, it didn't feel all that different from what I had done before. I got my MFA in playwriting at Brown, and I had directed plays before that, and so working with actors was what I was comfortable with, and all of the actors in this, like the main performers, Thomas and Lily and Eli and Lachlan, they came on the set knowing their lines and with the sort of courage and willingness to take chances, and honestly, that was the easy part of the job. Like, none of them were difficult to work with, or I didn't have to be too strategic in terms of like, oh, well, I better shoot this person first so I can give that other actor time to actually like learn their lines. So I mean, she was kind of a pleasure to work with, and yeah, that wasn't too much of a challenge.
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that you bit off a little more than you can chew in terms of the sets and how big the production was, considering that you did start out as a playwright, and the tendency seems to be to adapt a play as a playwright, and it becomes a sort of one-room sort of thing. Do you think you were consciously trying to avoid the feeling of this being adapted from a play?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of playwrights / filmmakers out there whose work I just adore, and like a lot of plays that I think make really good movies. But I was very conscientious about wanting this to feel like a movie. I didn't want it to feel like a play. I feel like frequently when that happens, people sort of go like, oh well, there's a good script there, but it felt stagey. I wanted this to feel cinematic, and one of the things that films can do that theater can't is move through space. There are ways in which you can sort of inventively move through space in certain kinds of plays, but in general, that's, you're stuck in a theater, and, that feeling is always going to be over you. And so, that was one of the big things that I wanted to be thinking about when I made this was, how can I make sure that this feels like a film?
Is that what drew you to making a film in the first place, as opposed to staging this story as a play?
I don't think I ever actually thought of this as a play. I think it started as a movie in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Partially because I had seen some movies leading up to this that were sort of like, coming of age films / young love stories that at the time I didn't like them. That something about them rubbed me the wrong way, and it did so in such a way that it made me go like, oh, what would my version of this look like? I wonder if how would I do it differently? The irony is that since going off and making some freaks, I've developed a lot of respect for some of those films. There's nothing that makes you humble quite like trying to make your own movie and realizing just how hard it actually is.
Well, were you a fan of John Hughes movies or Freaks and Geeks or Superbad? Any of those sort of coming of age? Did you?
I like some John Hughes movies. I'm a bigger fan of like Say Anything than I am of like The Breakfast Club, for instance. It's the characters are all just a little more unusual. But honestly, the coming of age films that I really like are the ones that tend to have like some teeth to them. So like Welcome to the Dollhouse is one of my favorites, and there's this movie from 1969 by Frank and Eleanor Perry called Last Summer, which is just a complete masterpiece. It's like 4 kids on Fire Island over the course of a single summer, and it feels like sort of emotionally epic, and it's just brilliant. The film Fat Girl is pretty wonderful. Like, there's a lot of good ones, but I tend to gravitate towards movies that, like I said, have a little bit of an edge to them.
Mm-hmm. When you see there's something missing, when you see, I mean, it's a very popular, excuse me, sorry.
Sure.
It's a very popular genre. It's a very popular topic. I mean, do you critique these sorts of films and see what's or these films and TV shows and see, well, they got this wrong, or this is sort of missing, this is what it doesn't make me feel anything?
Sorry, are you asking, do I still do that now, or did I do that then? Or?
Was that the type of, do you see excuse me, sorry. I'll rephrase the question. Do you see these coming of age stories, and because they're very popular, and see, oh, there's something missing in these, or there's something that they got wrong?
Yeah. I mean, that was partially why I wrote Some Freaks. Some Freaks wasn't a response to like Last Summer or Say Anything. I was there were other movies that I was thinking about at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, there was definitely, and I think that's sort of, like that's kind of my favorite form of criticism is when someone sees a movie that they don't like and then they go like, all right, well, let me see if I can do, not do it better, but like what would my version look like? I think, cinema, it should be building upon itself, and what you don't want to see is like, oh, I love that movie, I'm going to go try to remake the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm. And you're not afraid also in this film to make everybody look bad at certain points. There are certain points where nobody's really the hero. Everybody has faults, and you set that up quite well in the beginning with the when Matt is being tortured by his fellow high school students, and then all of a sudden he has that flipped when he's telling a fat girl joke, and Jill happens to hear it. Those are the first two things that people see.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Lily and I actually talked quite a bit about this early on because, the only thing she had really done before this was she was on the Glee project, which is like a reality show where the winner gets to be a character on the TV show Glee.
Mm-hmm.
And, I never actually saw it. I cast her entirely based on her auditions in the room. But my understanding is that she was sort of portrayed in that as being kind of bitchy and snarky and one of the less likable people. And it's funny because, my interactions with Lily have been, she's warm and funny and totally just charitable work-wise. But, and she's sort of like, well, imagine that someone follows you around with a camera for 80 hours and then they have to cut that down to 45 minutes worth of footage. Like, you would like to think that they would just, like, trim down all your best moments, but the fact of the matter is we're people, and sometimes we say shitty things, and sometimes we do shitty things, and the more heightened the circumstance, the more likely it is that something could come out of your mouth that, you're not going to be proud of. And, I mean, like, you say that, like, yes, that applies to, like, 80 hours of footage, but, like, if you were to take a camera around and just sort of follow people for, 6 months of their adolescence, like, my guess is that most people, they've said and done things that they're not super proud of. But those things, I think, are what, for me at least, make me not necessarily like a character, but relate to them in a certain way, because, I think we all relate to messing up. We admire characters for their successes, but we relate to them for their failures. Mm-hmm. Even when the failure is, one of, kindness or ethics or something like that. And those are that's the kind of character that I'm interested in writing and honestly watching.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's also that big blow up between Matt and Jill in Elmo, where Elmo makes, I don't want to necessarily spoil this part of it, but it gets very mean. He
outs Jill for parts of her past that she was trying to keep private, and
yes,
yeah.
And there's never really a good resolution for that. Elmo never gets to. You never see Elmo apologize to Jill directly, and the next time you see Matt and Elmo, it's sort of like nothing ever happened. Was there a temptation to sort of try to put in some scene where they patched that up, or was that part of making the scene more realistic? They never really got the chance to do that.
A good question. I'm trying to remember.
Whether it was a conscious decision or a...
Yeah, no, sorry. I mean, it's to a degree, it's sort of strange talking about the movie because I wrote the first draft of the script back in 2012 and, finished directing it in 2015, so it's...
Are you're on to something else now? You're sort of moved...
I think that it was always only sort of lightly touched upon. Mm-hmm. I sort of feel like those scenes where people sort of like hash out their differences and what were you thinking? Well, here's what I was thinking, and how can we make this right? I mean, particularly at that age, at least, mm-hmm. It's not really a thing I would have thought. Like, whenever I had, fights with friends in high school, and, the way of patching it up is just to say, like, hey, look, mistakes were made. You want to go to a movie this Friday night? And it's just like, yeah, sure. Right. And there's just sort of an understanding that you're moving on. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I guess, what, and as you sort of grow up and you age and sort of learn how to be a little more sophisticated about navigating those emotional waters, hopefully, we learn to, like, kind of talk and dialogue and things like that. But at least at that age, it seemed in a way more realistic to just kind of let time do the healing, so to speak, and have the characters sort of just do what they're doing throughout, try to avoid awkwardness and try to avoid sort of emotional conflict and, hope that things work out.
And then you couldn't have the big sort of John Hughes resolution to the movie either.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of these movies are about, for the people who write and direct them, about going back and sort of correcting the narrative, about the characters doing what the filmmakers wish they'd done in those situations. And here, no one gets to truly resolve their regrets by the end of this.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good way of putting it. I think a lot of high school films, particularly those John Hughes movies, there's a degree of wish fulfillment in them. Like the character Matt was based on a few different people, but it was based on one friend in particular in high school, who really was, he got picked on a lot and was kind of the butt of a lot of jokes, and it was hard for him. And I remember I actually watched The Breakfast Club with him, and at the time, I had seen it once before, and I liked it pretty well. But as we were watching it, he got more and more irritable. And towards the end, he finally got frustrated and just started shaking his head and going, "Yep, it's just that easy. That's all you just needed. One day of detention with these people, and suddenly you're pals. Way to go, movie." And it was really upsetting him because, like, how sort of inherently dishonest it was being. Because that's the truth, is that, it takes more than a day in a room with people who are sort of, on different ladders of that, or different levels of that social ladder, to sort of sand down some of those rough edges in relationships.
Did it take a lot of workshopping to get to that sort of honesty in this project, given that it's not a directly autobiographical piece?
Did it take a lot of what?
A lot of workshopping. Did you have to a lot of drafts and a lot of working with say the actors or other people to figure out where the center
honestly,
of these characters are?
The biggest sort of revelation I had in terms of the writing was so I wrote the first draft of the script while I was teaching screenwriting at Brown. I had, like I said, I got my MFA there, and after I graduated, I was hired for another year and a half to keep teaching. Anyways, I finished a draft of it, and I ended up inviting all of my students one Saturday morning to kind of gather in one of the theaters. I'm just like, hey, you're a lot closer to 18 than I am. I'd love to just do a group read of this and see what you all think. And, and so, I don't know, like 15 students, gathered together in this one room, and we read the script aloud. And afterwards, they gave me notes. What do you think? Does this feel authentic? And one of the first notes that someone gave was that they're just like, something about these characters. I don't know. They just seem very sort of like they're from the 90s. Just like, oh, yeah, funny that.
They are.
Yeah, I
they're
graduated
from the
in
90s.
2002. So so what makes you say that? They're just like, well, the particular form of abuse that characters sort of inflict on each other is very sort of direct and sort of, they use their words like a hammer, calling one another fag or whatever. And they're just like, I don't know, these days it feels more sort of oblique, where characters hurt each other, or, people just hurt each other by sort of what they don't say, or saying something sort of innocuous but in a way that has a double meaning that everyone is sort of meant to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And, so it kind of like words are no longer being used like a hammer, they're being used like a scalpel. And, and so that reading was actually like really, really valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And, I went back and rewrote it with that in mind.
Mm-hmm. How did you develop Elmo's subplot, being the homophobic, closeted gay character?
So I kind of look at all of the characters as, the film sort of seems like a meditation on self-destruction, that's kind of like the theme that interested me for this project.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's, probably, that feels in some ways inherent to that age where you drank 10 beers and then got behind the wheel of a car and you thought you were going to get home fine. Like, what were you thinking?
Mm-hmm.
And, this, boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever has cheated on you 3 times, but you're going to get back together with them one more time because you think this time it'll be different.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see how that goes for you. So all of the characters, I think, are deeply, deeply self-destructive. When I started writing, I had no idea that Elmo's story was going to go in that direction,
Mm-hmm.
but it felt in keeping with the sort of the themes and the ideas of the piece, and honestly, these kinds of stories, once you sort of, set up a few sort of, once you knock over a few dominoes, the rest just kind of go.
Mm-hmm.
About a third of the way through, I think I sort of started to get a sense of where his story was going, but, I don't think I knew how dark it was going to get until I was basically there.
Mm-hmm. Well, rejection as self-defense seems to be a big theme throughout this. It's definitely a theme with Jill. It's definitely a theme with Elmo. I don't know if it's a theme. I don't know if it's a theme for Matt as much. Would you say it's a theme for Matt as well?
Rejection.
Rejection as self-defense, because Jill rejects people sort of because of what they think, or what she thinks they were going to think of her. She sort of rejects people in advance, so she doesn't get hurt. And Elmo does that.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think he does that exactly, but I think it's also I think the sort of theme of his narrative is sort of like just slightly adjacent to it, which is that being rejected sort of it leaves scars. You don't need to get beaten up at the playground or whatever to have scars that you carry with you. Sometimes it's emotional, and these things can harden a person and make you cynical or bitter or angry. And I think that's kind of Matt's narrative is, he hasn't really gotten a lot out of people in his life, and that kind of makes him a pretty bitter person. However, the flip side of that is in the first half of the movie, to a degree, I mean, he's shitting on Jill without having actually really gotten to know her, and he's doing it with, his one other friend while they're hanging out in the house playing video games. And so to a degree, he's kind of rejecting someone, not as a form of hurting Jill, but just like, even when you're at the bottom of the social ladder, like, how do you climb up a step? Well, you get up a step by knocking somebody else down. Like, it doesn't always need to be that way, and I don't think it should. But I think that's how a lot of people sort of operate in the world, and that's definitely how he does.
Mm-hmm. It's how casually we can hurt each other. Back to what you were saying before about it being somewhat oblique, the way people will hurt each other in this film.
Yeah.
So how we'll shift gears a little bit. I wanted to talk about the music on the film, in the film, and
Yeah.
there are a couple of different elements in it. Was Lily's song from the sort of in the first section there, and then at the end. How did that come about? Was there a song you were always going to have that character play and sing, or was it just that Lily's musical talent made that a part of this story?
No, I think in the original draft of the script it just says, like, Jill sings a song or something like that, or plays a song, and Matt tries to keep up.
Mm-hmm.
And like, this is another thing where if I were to write something like that into a film now, like, as soon as we started pre-production, I would try to get the rights to whatever it was that I had in my head at that time. And, there were some songs that we were thinking of using. I can't remember what they are now, but, we were kind of going back and forth and communicating with various singers and songwriters and trying to figure out what we could get the rights to. And Lily actually just sort of came up to me the day before we were going to shoot that scene, and she said, I think I have an idea for a song. If I sent it to you, would you consider putting it in the movie? And I'm just like, yeah, of course. And later that night, she put something together, and she sent it to me, and it was what ended up going in the movie. And, it's just beautiful. She kind of made my job a lot easier in that way.
Mm-hmm. And you also chose to work with Walter Sickert in the Army of Broken Toys for the score. How did that come about?
Yeah, I had seen them play at AS220 in Providence a few years before that. And I just love them. Have you seen them play live?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I just thought they were, like, amazing. I grew up sort of listening to, like, Boingo Boingo and Tom Waits, and they still sort of feel like some sort of weird, child of those two different bands slash artists. But, yeah, I just think they're amazing. When I was a playwright in grad school, I actually, for my thesis play, I reached out to them and asked if they would put together some music for that, and we kind of exchanged some emails for a little while, and somehow the whole thing ended up falling through. But I always loved their music. Anyways, but the way that this ended up working was there was just one song of theirs that I wanted to use in the film, and that's towards the end where Elmo and Justin are sort of getting drunk and they're singing while music plays off of his laptop. And I wanted to use one of Walter's songs, and we reached out to them and sent them the script, and they ended up saying, like, yeah, no, we'd be happy to have the song in it, but we'd also be interested in doing the score. Would you be interested in meeting and talking about this? And I had actually been interviewing composers for, I don't know, like a couple of months at that point, and people were sending over material that was very polished and clean, and I don't know, like, sort of, it was accomplished in a certain way, and yet felt utterly, utterly wrong for the movie, and Walter and I ended up meeting in person in Boston, and, we just hit it off immediately. He was someone where I could sort of say, all right, so this scene, I think it needs, like, one of the first pieces of music that he put together was actually the very last piece in the movie where Matt sort of is in the hospital with Jill, and he puts his head on her shoulder. The camera's sort of pulling out. I'm just like, yeah, I want that piece of music to sound like it's the beginning of something, like it's the beginning of a movie, not the end of a movie. And I think that's basically all I said to him. He's just like, rock it, I can do that. And, ended up creating that piece. And so it was just nice, he could sort of take my ramblings and put them into something coherent, and it was just a very lovely working relationship. But yeah, I mean, it really just came out of having been a fan of the band for a while, and knowing what sounds he liked to create, and then sort of confirming that it would make sense based on just getting along with him interpersonally.
Well, the band has a sort of wonderfully outlandish presence, and that's not necessarily what you're looking for in the score as well. So you must have seen he's done other score work as well. Was that something you heard?
Yeah, he sent me a score that he did on, I think it was a short film that they were trying to turn into a feature or something. I think it was animated.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't see a whole lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
If there was one, the big thing that he and I sort of tried to figure out over the course of our collaboration was how big does the score need to be? Because initially he put together some pieces of music where it was the entire band, and it had a very big sound to it. And as we sort of continued to refine the score, it just kind of kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which felt appropriate because this is a really small movie. It's essentially about three teenagers. In a lot of ways, I think Walter was probably the hardest working person on the movie. He just kind of kept coming up with new and interesting ideas, and I just had this wealth of songs to pick from to incorporate into the film.
Now, how did Neil LaBute come on as a producer of the movie?
So I worked for Neil as an intern back in 2006 to 2008, I think. Sort of off and on, just a couple of days a week. I would go into the office and read scripts and, write coverage and deliver mail and so on and so forth. And, he was just really generous with his time. I would ask him to read a play that I was working on, and he would, generally make time to give it a look and give me notes and give me thoughts. And, was always just really supportive of what I was trying to do. And, I ended up, after I got out of grad school and was hired to teach, I told him that. He said, great, let me know when you want me to come give a lecture in one of your classes.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's terrific. And, so we ended up bringing him to Rhode Island, and, he came to one of my classes and spoke about screenwriting, and then later that night we screened Your Friends and Neighbors, had a, student and faculty show up, and it was this big Q&A, and it was just great. But anyways, during that time, I spent a large chunk of one of those days just kind of showing him around Providence and giving him the lay of the land. And at one point, we went to a little restaurant. He asked what I was working on, and I told him. And he basically said, "Great, let me know when you want me to take a look at it." And I ended up sending the script, something like a year later, and he agreed to come on board and help us get it made. He was kind of everything that you would want in an executive producer.
Mm-hmm.
He was both hands-on in terms of helping to solve problems that we were having,
mm-hmm.
and giving notes on different cuts of the movies and stuff like that. But at the same time, going oh, this is Ian's movie. This isn't my movie. I'm not going to try to make this a Neil LaBute film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, was that a worry that you bring in somebody with such an established name and an established personality that might sort of start taking over?
No, No, I mean, by that point, I had known him for 5 or 6 years, and I don't know, he's very supportive of young filmmakers, and so I'm friends with this guy named Lee Tolan Krieger, who directed The Vicious Kind, and Neil was an executive producer on that, and Lee had told me how great Neil had been to work with, and so, yeah, I didn't really have any concern.
Mm-hmm. So what's next? Do you want to do more film work, or are you working on plays again? Where do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I mean, I love plays, and I would definitely like to keep working in theater. For the last couple of years, I've been dedicating most of my time to film, just because you kind of do the thing where there seems to be the most opportunities, and so far, film has actually been really, really good to me in that way. So, yeah, I have a couple of projects lined up that I'm supposed to write and direct. One is a sort of a small drama. The other is a horror movie. I just sort of adore genre films, and so I've always really wanted to kind of make my own. Have also started working as sort of like a screenwriter for hire. And so I have some other things that I won't necessarily direct, but I'm supposed to write.
Can you say anything about the horror film? That's something I enjoy greatly. That's part of what I write about on the blog and podcast.
Yeah, I don't want to give away too much yet. So there's it's kind of sort of that House of Psychotic Women subgenre of horror. So like Rosemary's Baby and Black Swan and Repulsion and Possession, like that genre, I'm totally fascinated by and just completely in love with. So that's the kind of genre that I want to tackle. There's a little bit of Let's Scare Jessica to Death in it, and Habit by Larry Fessenden.
I'm thinking, if you think about it, how different are the tools that you need to write and direct a straight drama versus a horror film? Because it seems like you could probably just change the music in a few scenes, and you could make a lot of dramas into a horror film.
Oh, yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, honestly, most of my favorite horror movies really walk the line between being a horror and a drama. Like, I would say that Take Shelter is one of the best horror movies of the last 10 years. I know some people don't really think of that as a horror movie, but, like, to me it absolutely is.
Well, it's all about his fear.
What's that?
It's all about his fear of what's going to happen, and the horrific things that he sees that no one else does.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also like it kind of has to do with what themes you're addressing. Like, in a weird way, you could sort of look at something like, so like Take Shelter and The Changeling, with Angelina Jolie are in some ways similar in that they're both films that are about people who are kind of worried that they're losing their minds. But for me, the difference is that The Changeling ultimately becomes like a very sort of small, grounded film, which is specifically about sort of not even mental illness, but about like control and being controlled. And as the film progresses, Take Shelter kind of just keeps tapping into bigger and bigger themes, and it ends up being about like the unknowable. What can you know, and how do you know it, and how do you trust the things you see? And to me, that's sort of, I mean, I think it's a scary film, but I also find those themes deeply compelling.
You could probably make a comparison between Take Shelter and They Live.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Oh, man, yeah, yes, definitely.
All right. Well, thank you for speaking with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, totally. This is a pleasure.
An arrow to the head isn't always a trick.
Thanks again to Ian McDonald for speaking with me. You can find Some Freaks on iTunes and Amazon and keep up with the news on the Some Freaks Facebook page. To play us out, a track from comedian Sean Sullivan's new album Song and Dance Man, which is available October 13th on the Comedy Dynamics label. Sullivan's a great comic. He's witty and sarcastic. Two things that don't necessarily go together, but Sullivan nails it. I've seen him for years in the Boston scene, and I'm thrilled this is out there for all of you to hear. Look him up. Take it away, Sean.
I have the kids, and we moved recently. I told my wife, I sat her down, we had like a real talk, and I said I've been doing comedy for 13 years. I've done all these great things. It's I've made all these sacrifices. It's time for me to do something for me, and it's time to take my comedy career to the next level. So last summer I packed up the family and we moved to West Bridgewater, Massachusetts. Yeah. Said it's time for me to do something for me. And West Bridgewater, I hear, is the entertainment hotspot of the Massachusetts Bridgewaters. If you're gonna pick one of them, West is best, so I'm told from the bumper stickers on every yokel in town. West Bridgewater is a right-to-farm community. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. It says so on the sign as you drive into town. It says, "Welcome to West Bridgewater. This is a right-to-farm community." I don't know who's been stepping on the farm rights of the people of West Bridgewater that they had to get so bold with the welcome to sign, but if you're planning on coming down to West Bridgewater and suppressing some farm rights, keep on trucking, sister. Because this here is right to farm country. I thought everywhere was a right. I thought if you had land and you knew how to farm it, you could just fucking farm it. I didn't know there was a legal process. That means that there are illegal farms out there, which means that there are illegal farm inspectors, which is now a job I'm actively pursuing. I just want to be able to go up to people and be like, "Hey, what's going on over there? Oh, you got some cucumbers? Cool. How many? Okay, well, that's starting to sound like a crop. Shut it down! This is an illegal farm!" What, do you think you're in West Bridgewater? You just have the right to farm? While I'm at it, I'm just going around knocking over lemonade stands this is a residential area. This is not zoned commercially. I don't care if you're 6 years old. You show me a permit, you get the fuck out of here. My wife wants to get chickens now. I was like, oh, okay. So we're just gonna fully embrace the right to farm lifestyle. I mean, our forefathers did die for the right, so it'd be disrespectful not to have it. She wants to get chickens. Her big selling point to me on the chickens is the money that we're gonna save on eggs. It's oh, I don't want to burst your bubble, honey, but I don't know that the financial pressures we're facing as a family are going to be alleviated by the money we free up from eggs. I don't know if that's where we should be tightening the belt right now. If we really wanted to save a couple bucks on eggs, probably should have been those ones we fertilized 3 years ago. That's really, if you just look at my map, you just see that's when costs really started to spike. Spending kind of got out of control in 2013. She found a service where for $500 you can rent chickens. Yeah, you rent the chicken. You give these people $500. They come into your yard in March. They set up the chickens. And then in October, they come and pick up your chickens. She goes, so we can try it out. See if we like the chickens. I said, I already don't like the chickens. So it's all the same. Let's just keep on not having chickens. But, it's going to happen. I can't say we're going to get chickens. So I started looking at the books. You know what I mean? Maybe she's right about this egg bullshit. And right now, average week, we're spending roughly $3 on eggs. I know that sounds crazy to you guys, but I'm in show business, okay? I like to treat myself right. So every Friday, I crack open the wallet, take out $3, plop it on the counter, and those are my egg bucks. We might go crazy around Easter, I don't know. But an average month, we're looking roughly $12 on eggs, $144 a year on eggs. Now, Why am I doing that? When for $500, I get a bunch of chickens in my yard. Every morning I go out and steal an egg from a chicken. That's what my breakfast has been missing, barnyard danger. I'm not getting enough chicken bites with my omelets. She goes, well, we could sell the eggs. I was like, well, that's the American dream. Not only am I a farmer, I'm a small business owner where my small business is selling weird eggs to people from my rented chickens. Chickens are... I've learned a lot about chickens in the last couple months because I've been doing this research because someday I'm going to have chickens. And this is an interesting fact. A lot of people don't know this about chickens, but this is absolutely true. Chickens are fucking disgusting. They're the worst animal on the planet. I don't even consider them animals. I don't think a vegetarian should feel bad about eating a chicken. I hate it. They're monsters. I don't want them cage-free. I want them in cages, inside slightly bigger cages. Here's a story, right? This summer, we went to go get ice cream. I bring the kids, we go get ice cream, and the place we went to must have had a meeting at the beginning of the season where they were like, everything around here is too sanitary. How can we gross this up real fast? And then some guy in the back was like, 50 chickens? And they were like, bingo! Because now you get your ice cream, and then you have to tiptoe through all these chickens, and we noticed one of the chickens was a little beat up. A little thinner than the other chicken. Some feathers ruffled on his wing. Not looking so good, this chicken. And how do you think the other 49 chickens greeted their wounded friend? With compassion? Or did they try to peck it to death in front of my kids? What do you think? Yeah, I don't know if you guys know that about chickens. If they sense a weakness in another chicken, they just fucking kill it like it's a prison snitch. They don't give a shit, chickens. We were with my father-in-law. He was in 4-H when he was a kid. He's like, we need to get the babies out of here right now. I go, what? Why? He goes, because those chickens are about to murder that other chicken. I go, what? He goes, hey, chickens, right? No, I don't. I don't know what it is about our relationship makes you think I'd understand the murder instincts of chickens, but I don't look at my son when he skins his knee like, well, he had a good run. Better try to kill him with my mouth now.
Dear Young,